Kuwait is a small, relatively open economy. The Kuwaiti currency is the highest valued currency unit in the world. Kuwait has nearly 10% of the world's oil reserves. Petroleum accounts for nearly half of GDP and 95% of export revenues and government income. In recent years, Kuwait has done little to diversify its economy due to positive fiscal situation and hostile relationship between the parliament and government, which has prevented the implementation of economic reforms. Kuwait's first free trade zone was inaugurated in 1999. Kuwait has a well-developed banking system. The National Bank of Kuwait is the largest bank in the country and one of the largest in the Arab world. Diversification. Kuwait's revenues rely significantly on oil, increasing from 85% of total revenues in 2001 to 95% in 2013. Diversification of the economy remains a long-term issue. In recent years, Kuwait has done little to diversify its economy due to positive fiscal situation and hostile relationship between the National Assembly Parliament and government, which has prevented the implementation of economic reforms. Prior to the Gulf War, Kuwait was successfully diversifying its economy. The development of non-oil sectors significantly declined after the Iraqi invasion in 1990. After hundreds of companies and foreign institutions relocated to Dubai and Bahrain, during the past 20 years, Kuwait has not implemented any development projects with significant economic value, while the dependence on oil revenues has increased. Between 2006 and 2012, political turmoil hindered attempts at economic diversification. Oil. In 1934, the Emir of Kuwait granted an oil concession to the Kuwait Oil Co., jointly owned by the Anglo-Persian Oil Company and Gulf Oil Corporation. In 1976, the Kuwaiti government nationalized coke. The following year, Kuwait took over onshore production in the divided zone between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Coke produces jointly there with Texaco, Inc., which by its 1984 purchase of Getty Oil Co., acquired the Saudi Arabian onshore concession in the divided zone. In the offshore divided zone, the Arabian Oil Co., 80% owned by Japanese interests and 10% each by the Kuwaiti and Saudi governments, has produced on behalf of both countries since 1961. The original concession agreements will expire in January 2003. Negotiations to replace the concession with a technical service agreement should be completed in 2002. The Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, an integrated international oil company, is the parent company of the government's operations in the petroleum sector, and includes Kuwait Oil Company, which produce oil and gas, Kuwait National Petroleum Co., refining and domestic sales, Petrochemical Industries Co., producing ammonia and urea, Kuwait Foreign Petroleum Exploration Co., with several concessions in developing countries, Kuwait Oil Tanker Co., and Santa Fe International Corp. The latter, purchased outright in 1982, gives KPC a worldwide presence in the petroleum industry. KPC also has purchased from Gulf Oil Co. refineries and associated service stations in the Benelux nations and Scandinavia, as well as storage facilities and a network of service stations in Italy. In 1987, KPC bought a 19% share in British Petroleum, which was later reduced to 10%. KPC markets its products in Europe under the brand Kuwait and is interested in the markets of the United States and Japan. Kuwait has about 94 billion barrels of recoverable oil reserves. Estimated capacity, before the war, was about 2.4 million barrels per day. During the Iraqi occupation, Kuwait's oil-producing capacity was reduced to practically nothing. However, tremendous recovery and improvements have been made. Oil production was 1.5 million barrels per day by the end of 1992, and pre-war capacity was restored in 1993. Kuwait's production capacity is estimated to be 2.5 million barrels per day. Kuwait plans to increase its capacity to 3.5 million barrels per day by 2005. Reserve funds. The Kuwait Investment Authority is Kuwait's sovereign wealth fund specializing in foreign investment. The KIA is the world's oldest sovereign wealth fund. The KIA manages two funds: the General Reserve Fund and Future Generations Fund. The GRF is the main treasurer for the government. It receives all state revenues and all national expenditures are paid out of this fund. The KIA does not disclose its financial assets in public, but it is estimated that the KIA has $410 billion in assets as of February 2014. The KIA was the main source of capital for the Kuwaiti government during the Gulf War. The Kuwaiti government relied on the KIA to pay for coalition expenses and post-war reconstruction. The KIA was worth $100 billion prior to 1990. KIA funds were depleted to $50 billion after the Gulf War. Future Generations Fund. The Future Generations Fund was created in 1976 by transferring 50% from the General Reserve Fund at that time. The FGF is a saving fund for future generations. 25% of all state revenues are annually transferred to the fund. All of the FGF is invested abroad, with an estimated 75% invested in the US and Europe and the rest in emerging markets, mainly China and India. Investments. Kuwait is the Arab world's largest foreign investor, with $8.4 billion in FDI outflows in 2013. Kuwait consistently tops regional rankings in FDI outflows. In 2013, Kuwait almost tripled its foreign investments. Over the last 10 years, Kuwait has doubled investments in the UK to more than $24 billion. In 2014, Kuwait became the largest investor in China. Agriculture. Agriculture accounts for 1% of Kuwait's economy and 8% of the gross domestic product. The agricultural sector provides fruit and vegetables for sale in the country's supermarkets. Agriculture is limited by the lack of water and arable land. The government has experimented in growing food through hydroponics and carefully managed farms. However, most of the soil which was suitable for farming in south-central Kuwait was destroyed when Iraqi troops set fire to oil wells in the area and created vast oil lakes. Fish and shrimp are plentiful in territorial waters, and larger-scale commercial fishing has been undertaken locally and in the Indian Ocean. Shipping. The Kuwait Oil Tankers Co. has 35 crude oil and refined products carriers and is the largest tanker company in an OPEC country. Kuwait also is a member of the United Arab Shipping Company. Tourism. Macroeconomic trend. This is a chart of trend of gross domestic product of Kuwait at market prices estimated by the International Monetary Fund with figures in millions of Kuwaiti dinars. For purchasing power parity comparisons, the US dollar is exchanged at 0.288 Kuwaiti dinars only. Mean wages were $27.83 per man-hour in 2009. As for skilled and experienced Kuwaiti, the average monthly salary is hiked up tremendously, to an average of $10,000 plus a month excluding living and other benefits. Kuwait is a tax-free country, so all the above figures reflect actual take-home numbers. During the 1970s, Kuwait benefited from the dramatic rise in oil prices, which Kuwait actively promoted through its membership in the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The economy suffered from the triple shock of the 1982 Souk al-Manik stock market crash, the mid-1980s drop in oil prices, and the 1990 Iraqi invasion and occupation. The Kuwaiti government in exile depended upon its $100 billion in overseas investments during the Iraqi occupation in order to help pay for the reconstruction. Thus, by 1993, this balance was cut to less than half of its pre-invasion level. The wealth of Kuwait is based primarily on oil and capital reserves, and the Iraqi occupation severely damaged both. In the closing hours of the Gulf War in February 1991, the Iraqi occupation forces set ablaze or damaged 749 of Kuwait's oil wells. All of these fires were extinguished within a year. Production has been restored, and refineries and facilities have been modernized. Oil exports surpassed their pre-invasion levels in 1993, with production levels only constrained by OPEC quotas. Other statistics. Investment. 6.6% of GDP. Household income or consumption by percentage share. Lowest 10%. NA. Highest 10%. NA. Agriculture. Products. Practically no crops. Fish. Industrial production growth rate. -5%. Electricity. Production. 38.19 billion kWh. Consumption. 35.52 billion kWh. Exports. 0 kilowatt-hours. Imports. 0 kilowatt-hours. Electricity. Production by source. Fossil fuel. 100%. Hydro. 0%. Other. 0%. Nuclear. 0%. Oil. Production. 2,418,000 barrels. D. Consumption. 400,000 barrels. D. Exports. 2.57 million barrels per day. Imports. NA. Proved reserves. 105.0 billion barrels, including the divided zone. Natural gas. Production. 8.3 billion cum. Consumption. 8.3 billion cum. Exports. 0 cubic meters. Imports. 0 cubic meters. Proved reserves. 1.572 trillion cum. Current account balance. $31.51 billion. Exports. Commodities. Oil and refined products. Fertilizers. Imports. Commodities. Food, construction materials, vehicles and parts, clothing. Reserves of foreign exchange and gold. $9.296 billion. Exchange rates.